Did you have a good afternoon? Some of you did. Hey, if you talk back, I don't think the ceiling's going to fall in. We're all Christians, right? We love each other. Hey, listen, I had a really good morning this morning, in the sense where my wife and I were on the way home, and we just really enjoyed worshiping with you this morning and getting to meet some of y'all. And we thank you for welcoming us and my family. It's very nice of you. I also want to brag on Chris, too. I would see Chris every now and then, and I think he is a really good fit for you guys. I love Chris. I love hearing his stories, and I got to hear him preach a few times, and it seems like he's really worked out for y'all. I remember some of the few guys that y'all have had. I remember Daniel, and I can't remember who was between Daniel and Chris, but Chris seems like a good fit for y'all. Did I tell y'all to be opening to Hebrews? All right, let's do that. Hebrews chapter 12. We'll get there in just a moment. But I want to see how many of you are prepared for tomorrow. Everybody get your bread? Everybody get your milk? You got a full tank of gas, right? If you're like me, if there's a snowstorm or anything, like an apocalypse or a zombie apocalypse, whatever's coming, I'll go through the protocol. I'll go and get bread and milk, and I'll fill up my gas. I use the gas, but I don't use the milk and the bread. I don't know why I have it there, but y'all the same way? You got, the pantry full of bread, and you're like, what am I going to do with this? I don't eat it anyway. All right. Maybe it's just me and my family. We end up feeding it to the dogs or the cows or something, We waste it. All right. Anyway, I hope you guys have a good day tomorrow. Don't burn your eyes. Okay? Have a good day. Wear your protective glasses and stay away from the people outside of the county. They're crazy. If you drove from Texas to see this, I don't know. I don't know what to expect tomorrow. I saw a Texas license plate, and I've heard people say they saw a Kansas and whatnot. Anyway, oh well. Hope it's going to be a good day. All right. Hebrews chapter 12. Read with me beginning in verse 1. It says, therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us lay aside every encumbrance and sin which easily entangles us, and let us run the race with endurance, the race that is set before us. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame, and he has sat down on the right hand of the throne of God. It says, for consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you may not grow weary and lose heart. You see, the author of Hebrews here is clearly referring to the ancient Olympic Games or the ancient Greek Games. And this concept is not far from us. Every 4 years, but every 2 years, we have some kind of Olympic game, whether it's the Winter Olympics or the Summer Olympics. I think, was it last summer down in, where was it? Down in, guys, I'm tired. You're going to help me out here. What country was it down there in South America? It was in, no. It was down there where, Rio de Janeiro. What country? That's Brazil. Yeah. Brazil, right? All right. So they had it down in Brazil. And so all we talked about for 4 years was about the upcoming Olympic Games. And we had all of our Olympians down there, right? And I don't know if you know anything about Olympians, but like from an early age, if there's any kind of talent there, someone's going to train them just for that specific event for years. And there's like Olympic complexes where they will go and they'll practice for like a year or 2 years every single day, trying to figure out how to cut down times or make the best score just for this 5-minute event or this 1-minute event. So much time and effort is given. And that's kind of the concept of what we think about when we think about Olympics. But really and truly, our games spun out of the Greek games. The Greek, I guess they're Olympic games. And so that's kind of what the author is referring to. These athletes spent several months of intense training, just like they do today, to perform their top, at their top level. They wanted to work out the basics to build up the performance, so whenever that event happened, they were at their peak. And they ended the time to work off any unnecessary weight that slowed them down. Verse 1, it says, "Let us lay aside every weight and sin that easily entangles us or snares us." Christians should lay aside the things which hinder us living out our Christian faith. Now, I want you to imagine that last summer you went down to Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. Okay, I'm going to say Rio from now on. And you went to the track, because your favorite event is a track. Now, have you ever heard of Usain Bolt? The guy from Jamaica. He's like really fast. He does the 200 meter in like seconds. Like they shoot the gun and he's already done. He's that fast. Okay? Imagine that you're sitting there and you want to see him. And like I said just a second ago, he's spent months and years preparing for this event. Now, as they're lining up and they call the heat, you see Usain Bolt get up there and he does all of his stretches and they're getting ready to call him the line. He goes up to the start blocks and then he takes these 20-pound weights and he straps them to his ankles. All right? You're watching binoculars like, this is interesting. This ain't horse racing. They don't strap weights in the saddle. This is, whoever's the fastest run gets to win, right? So he lines up and he's got these 20-pound weight on each ankle and they shoot the gun and he takes off and he's in dead last. You're thinking to yourself, no, that doesn't make sense, does it? Why would an Olympic runner who's the fastest man in the world go and strap weights around his ankles? You're thinking, this is silly, it doesn't make sense. Well, apply that to the Christian life. Why would someone who spent a lifetime or months or years inside the life of Christ go and start strapping things on that slows them down? Why would people continue to live in sin when they know that it prevents them a healthy relationship with God? Why is it crazy for one man who's an Olympic runner to strap weights on his... By the way, he didn't do that. It's just an idea, right? But why would it make sense for him to do that? But it's okay for Christians to dabble in certain sins or certain temptations when it slows them down and it affects their life with God. Really and truly, there's no difference, is there? Because if you're a Christian and you put Christ on in baptism, you're in a race. You're absolutely in a race. And that's what the author of Hebrews is telling us. It says, you're in a race, so why in the world would you strap, or why would you not take those weights off so that you could run better or more efficient or faster? And he's talking about your life with God, your relationship with God. If you know something about the Jewish Christians, they were under tremendous pressure. Their religious practices and social and political heritage revolved around the law of Moses. And they thought that they had to continue, some of them struggled with the fact that they thought they had to continue to live out the law while being faithful to Christ at the same time. So there's all these political, social, and religious factors that were pressuring them to whether or not they want to give up Christ to continue following the things they knew since birth. So there was some tremendous pressure amongst these Hebrew Christians. And there was this battle of living out what they had known their entire life versus what they were learning inside of Christ, which looked different. There was different practices there. There was no more sacrifices. They were the sacrifice, the living sacrifice, if you will. Same goes for us. The temptations in this world is fighting for our attention and commitment, which pulls us away from Christ. If we don't learn to practice the fundamentals to build a stronger faith, then we will carry around unnecessary weight. It'll bog us down. It'll bury us. It makes us tired. And all this stuff that's going on in our country, it's designed to wear us out. By the way, this is one of the reasons why I love the Hardened Church of Christ. I heard somebody talk about fake news back there. I didn't catch all what was said, but I heard fake news. I'm like, they got it. They're getting it. All right, they're watching the right channel, okay? The world, the news, are trying to get us to get agitated, to get bothered. They want our lives disrupted. But let me reassure you of something. If our country ceased to exist, we still have a God who's in control. We have a God who will still keep His promises. And He will still be faithful to us when our government is not. You can rest assured in that. You can rest assured that no matter what happens to this country, God still has your back. And that's the promise that God gives us inside of Christ. And this race that we're in, it's a race that is run with endurance. It would be nice to think that this race is a sprint. Something that we could run and be done. We run it for a week. Oh, great. I can be a Christian for a week and then live their life any way I want, and then I know I can get heaven. No, that's not the way it works. It'd be nice to know that I can live a Christian life for a year, and after a year I can give that up and still get my reward in heaven. Unfortunately, it's not the way it works. Some of you are sitting here probably been Christians 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe 60 years. That's what we call endurance. That's an endurance race. There are some races, people actually physically running over 100 miles. It's called an ultra marathon. Or they'll run for 24 hours nonstop. Why they would want to do that, I don't know. But there's these events that actually do that. And it requires endurance. And how do you get endurance? Well, you get endurance by staying with it, by not quitting, by not walking, by putting one foot in front of the other and saying that no matter what happens, I'm going to continue down this race. Heard a story of I think it happened in New York. There was a marathon, one of the big marathons, right? This lady decides she's going to run this race, and she jumps off course, waits a little while, gets on the subway, goes across town, and picks up back the race and finishes. And she's acting like she ran this race all by her, or, the right way, the proper way, but she gets busted. Isn't that funny? But how many times do Christians enter this race, take a break, and decide they want to come back at the very end? Doesn't work that way. At least I hope it doesn't work that way. Because when I'm running the race and when I start this race, I want to see the people that I live with and I grew up with and the people that I love, I want to see them running beside me. I don't want to see them running off and hitting the subway. I want them on the journey with me. And I think that's why God created the church, because He knew that we're all on this journey together. And that when we have struggles, and that when we feel like quitting, we got somebody beside us say, no, we're not going to stop. I got you back. I'm going to walk beside you, but we're going to keep going. We're going to make it. See, that's the purpose of the church. It's for encouragement. Because we know that this race is long. It's not a sprint. And we can't depart and cheat. There is no cheating your way into heaven. Now let me say this. Because some of us sometimes we can be a little cynical and a little bitter. That somebody lived a life as a heathen, a sinner their entire life, and they knew that something was going on in their life. They knew their life was ending, but then they decided to follow Christ at the last moment. That's not for us to decide if they're going to heaven. It is God's. God forgives. God forgives sins. Okay? I want as many people in heaven as possible at the very end. It's not my job to judge their entire life. That's God's. Because if I was a judge, guess what? Probably nobody would be in there except for me, if I'm honest. Because I can be a little judgmental at times. But I'm glad I don't have that job. You know what I mean? 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24 through 25. This is what it says. Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win. For everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. And they then do it to receive a perishable wealth, but an imperishable one. We have to run the race. Let me find that again. Oh. We need to run, it says in verse 24, in such a way that we may win. What I want to call that, we need to run a race with purpose. with purpose. Some of us are running and we don't know why we're running. We just look around. Some of us just like to party. We're a party waiting to find a place, right? We've got to have a purpose. There's a purpose why you're here tonight and not at home. There's a purpose why you pray and why you give some of the money that God blessed you with each week. There's a reason, there's a purpose why that we go and we seek out those we hadn't seen in a couple of weeks, or those that are in a hospital. There's a purpose why we sit down with people that we love and have those difficult conversations. That's living a life with purpose. And if we're in this race, it's a race of endurance. Anytime that we have breath in our air, breath in our lungs, we are still in this race. And we train ourselves, we condition ourselves, and we prepare ourselves for this race, even for the race that's yet to come. And the result that we receive is patience. We receive perseverance and steadfastness. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 36, it says, For you are in need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what was promised. If we lay aside all the weight and sin, we get stronger, and the result that we get is patience, perseverance, and steadfastness. The position that we will get, the things that we get, the promises that we get through God, come through the process of running this race. It may not look like it, but I have actually ran 2 half marathons in my life. Y'all remember Old Hattler Morgan? Y'all remember Old Hattler? I lived in Old Hattler's house for about 8 years. And next to Hattler's house was this wonderful bypass, this 4-lane, whatever it is. And every day of the week for about 2 years, I would get up and I would run from Beanie's to the church and back, that big loop, 6 miles. And I trained myself. I got down so skinny, my mom didn't even recognize me. She thought my wife was starving me. I said, no, Mom, I'm actually trying to do this, you know. And the idea was there was no way possible that if I looked like this right now, that I was going to go run that half marathon. I just wasn't going to do it. I could probably do it. It might take a while, but I wasn't going to be able to run it. I had to condition myself. But I didn't quit. It was a journey and a process that I was on. As Christians, we have to understand that God loves us, and we have to understand that He sent His Son to this earth to die for our sins. That's the idea of conditioning. And then we're going to enter that race. You're not expected to be a wonderful, perfect Christian when you enter this race. Guess what? You're going to trip. You're going to fall. You're going to doubt. You're going to question whether or not you can finish. You're going to want to, you're going to need encouragement. You're going to need all those things. Why? Because you're human. You struggle. You're not perfect. And some of you are holding your standards to the fact that you think you are perfect. There's this thing called anxiety. You ever heard of anxiety or worry? It is a plague upon our hearts and our minds because we think that somehow we don't fit in. Somehow we think that we're not worth it. And it drives us crazy. We get on these social media sites and we compare ourselves to everybody else and we think that our lives are terrible compared to theirs. And it creates all this anxiety. I'm here to tell you tonight that you are worth it. You're absolutely worth entering this race and staying with it and not quitting. If you feel like quitting, stay with it. Here's why. Because somebody else needs you in that race with them. There's somebody here tonight who is here because they know that somebody else needs their support and vice versa. That's the importance of the church and staying with it and conditioning yourself. It's not always easy to recognize or let go of the things that tear us down as Christians. It's not. And that's some of the stuff that we need to lay aside. One of the most important things that we can do as Christians is to have a focal point. If we're running a race, when they tell you, when they train, they say, do not stare at your feet. Don't look at right here. Because it causes so many problems. If you look at your feet, if you look at yourself, things begin to pop in your mind like, oh my, look at all this. They tell you to find the farthest point that you can see on the horizon and run to it. I promise you that works. Let me tell you this story. I don't know. I don't want to tell you how old I was because I don't want to embarrass myself too bad. But I had this old BMX bike. I lived in Mayfield and lived in the city. I wasn't a country boy at the time. I lived down this long night street. It went for miles. Anyways, it's a jam-packed neighborhood. I was on my way home from my friends and the sun was behind me and it cast a shadow, this beautiful shadow on the road. And I just staring at that thing, just cruising. I hit a car. I hit a parked car. Not only did I hit a parked car, I landed on the hood of the car. And I laid on that thing, knocked me out for about a half a second. I got up. I looked around to see who saw me. I don't think there was damage. I went home. I was so embarrassed. One of the first times that I ever told that story was just a few years ago. So I can tell you whose house it was. It was an old junker car, okay? But the point is, I hit a car because I wasn't paying attention. I was looking down at the shadow. I was looking at the ground. I wasn't looking ahead. And it's no different than the spiritual lives. If we look at things that are right here, the troubles and the struggles that we have going on in our lives right now, and we're not looking past it, it's going to get us. Now, we have to deal with these things, but we still have to keep a focal point. We still have to look down the road to see the promises that lies ahead. And that is absolutely truth. Verse 2 there in Hebrews chapter 12, it says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, for the joy that set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, he is set down on the right hand of the throne of God. Our focal point, the things that we fix our eyes on is Jesus because he laid out exactly how it's done. How to live a life for Christ. All we have to do is recognize that we have to look beyond our current circumstances to see what's going on. It's reassuring to know that we have a Savior to follow, someone who has laid out a wonderful example on how to live this wonderful life or live out this faith for God. Jesus is described as the author and perfecter of the faith. He took the lead. He originated the faith. And even those in Hebrews chapter 11, the heroes of faith, the faith chapter, if you will, he perfected that. He perfected faith. Jesus' whole life was a prime example of faith in God. How to get through temptation and even the way through the cross and beyond. Jesus accomplished so many things. A lifelong faith that showed discipline, endurance, and faith. Now, the part where it says that the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, it's kind of hard for us to understand that. And it's hard because the cross for us is a sign of, it's actually a sign of Christ, isn't it? When we see the cross, we think of Christ. We think that his life was put up there. It's like a symbol of hope for us. But during Jesus' time, it wasn't. The cross was a sign of torture. No man ever wanted to be placed on the cross to be put to death. It was designed as an instrument of torture. People would suffer for days upon there. But the fact that it was a Passover when Jesus was crucified, there was an agreement amongst the Jews and the Romans that the guys that were crucified had to be put to death that day. Otherwise, Jesus might have hung up there a long time. And that's why they would go and break the feet of those dying on the day of the Passover to hurry up and expedite their death. But the fact that Jesus was up there, that's not anything that anyone wanted to do. Jesus was mocked, he was teased, and he was even cursed on the cross. But it says that the joy that was set before him, all these things were completed, and for Jesus it was worth it. Because the things that Jesus had in mind was knowing that you were going to be able to have an example on how to live out your Christian faith. That was one reason why Jesus did it. The next one is knowing that you wouldn't have to be crucified for your sins because Jesus did it for you. He also did it for the joy of knowing that you would have a way to be saved and have your life restored back to God. This should be one of the greatest encouragement to any Christian, knowing that God isn't going to ask you to do anything that He hasn't done already. You see, God sent His Son to this world to show us how to have a faith in Him, to show us how to be committed, to be unwavering, to defeat temptation, to be faithful. And God did that for us. He laid out this perfect example. And finally, in verse 3, it says, "Consider Him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you may not grow weary and lose heart." Jesus was God in the flesh. He had tribulation. He was oppressed. He was ridiculed. He was tempted as every way that we are, yet without sin. We covered that this morning. He considered how He handled Himself as He was going through these situations. He was steadfast, He endured, He was faithful, and He never quit. Could Jesus have quit at any point? I know time is short here, but I want to share this. There's a story that is called, Jesus could have called how many angels? 10,000 angels. There's a story in the Bible where God sent one angel. One angel, and I think, I shouldn't have quoted this, it's off the cuff here. I think He killed 100,000 men in one night. One angel? Imagine what 10,000 angels could have done. A whole legion of angels come down, the world wouldn't stand a chance. Jesus, He could have said, "God, I'm done. I can't do it." But He didn't. He never quit. When He was born to the Virgin Mary, He says, He didn't say, I guess, before He left to go to earth, He says, "I'm going to do this." Because that was His purpose. He never quit. Not once. And we think our trials are bad. Compare ourselves to Jesus and what He went through. Oh, we got this. We can do this, knowing all the things that Jesus has done. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 6 and 7. This is the scripture I want to leave you with. "I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, and I have kept the faith. Now there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness. The righteousness judge will reward me that day, not only to me, but also who loved His appearing." God has a promise. And the promise is that if you are faithful to Him, and you are committed to Him, and that you live your life for Him, He's going to bless you. He's going to bless you on earth, but He's going to bless you eternally. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to say that joy is coming. Sometimes our physical bodies quit, and our physical side of us fails, and we begin to question our faith. We begin to question our walk and whether or not this was all worth it. I'm telling you it is, because there's joy coming in the morning. I believe it was in the 1970s. I couldn't tell you the man's name or where he was from, but a man was at one of these Olympic Games, and he was going to do the Olympic marathon. 26.2 miles. Beginning of the race, this man tripped and fell, and he was trampled, he was kicked. He got up and fell back down. He was kind of beat up and sore. There was no way he was going to win this race. 26.2 miles takes a long time. Sometimes Olympic runners, it takes them about 2 hours or so, a little under 2 hours. The guys that won had already come and gone. They'd already done the dedication and given the medals, and were doing the songs of the countries, giving out medals, and here comes this guy limping across the line, and somebody saw him and says, "What are you doing?" And the guy says, "Well, I tripped and fell way back at the beginning of the race, and I just wanted to finish." And the reporter says, "Well, why in the world would you do that?" And the guy says, "My country did not send me here just to start this race. My country sent me here to finish this race." The point is that Jesus died on the cross not so that you could just start a relationship with God. He died on the cross so that you could finish your relationship with God. Following God is worth it. Do not quit, because He loves you, and God is encouraging you, and He's for you, and He's cheering for you. Tonight, if you're not a Christian, I'm telling you, this race that I'm in and that some of you are in, it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing to be called a child of God because I know that I have forgiveness and I'm going to sleep good tonight because of it. Some of you who may be Christian and you may be like the man who's just tripped and fallen and you're kind of running alone and you need some support, and you need some love, and you need some hugs. This invitation is for you too. So if there's anything that we can do for you tonight, we invite you to come while we stand and sing.
There's a stranger at the door.